Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. Oh my god, it's been so long. It's been so long since I've posted a video. I know it feels like it's been years actually, especially considering all of the good stuff that has come out since I last posted. How annoying. Just when life got so busy, so did Hollywood. But unfortunately I wasn't able to give you guys all of the juicy reviews that I wanted to because I've just been so busy. It's been a very exciting time. It continues to be an exciting time all the way through to October. It does mean that unfortunately I wasn't able to make a lot of time for filming and editing and posting videos on YouTube, and that will continue to be the case. Like I said, up until like October time, I'm going to try my best to continue to post a couple of bits and bobs over the next month or so, but keep in mind that I will be on holiday for the majority of September, so that may not be as, you know, possible as I'd like it to be, but we shall see. But anyways, I did want to give you guys like an update for as to why it was that I wasn't able to post for the last few weeks. I feel so bad. I got these incredible messages from some of you guys just asking where you at. Some of you guys are like, where you at, Jean? And honestly, I really appreciate it. It made me feel wanted, it made me feel missed, and I really appreciated it from the bottom of my heart. So thank you to everyone who reached out and asked what the hell was going on. And also, I'm sorry for leaving you guys in the dust and not telling you what was going on. I didn't anticipate things getting so busy so quickly. So, you know, before I knew it, weeks had passed and I hadn't even posted anything. And that's why last week I decided to put up that community post, just kind of giving you guys an update, as well as posting the poll that came along with it, where you guys got to vote on what you think I should do in light of the fact that I've missed so many good pieces of content that I could have reviewed and could have talked to you guys about. And the people have voted, okay, the votes have come through, and you decided that you think I should go ahead and do what I've been watching and try and cram together all of my thoughts and feelings on all of the stuff that came out over the last few weeks into one video. And honestly, challenge accepted. Honestly, challenge accepted. I'm gonna try and do my best and talk about the main things that I've been watching over these last few weeks. So we shall see how far we get along. But yeah, this is gonna be a tough one. You guys know I like to talk, but we're gonna try and keep these reviews nice and concise and cute. And of course, as per usual, I would love to hear you guys' thoughts on each of these projects. So be sure to leave your comments down below. And of course, if you're new here and you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and make sure you turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next. Now, without further ado, let's get into another edition of what I've been watching. So first of all, before we get into my thoughts on the individual projects that I've been checking out over the last few weeks, and yes, in today's video, I will try and incorporate both movies and TV shows. I tend to do one or the other in these videos simply because I tend to watch a bunch more TV shows than films, and it's still the case here, but I will try and incorporate both in today's video because there are some major films that I definitely need to talk about. But as I said, before we get into all of that good stuff, I did just want to preface this video by saying, you know, am I the only one? Am I the only one who's a little bit bored? I'm not gonna lie, guys, like I've been a little teensy-wincy bit bored of the stuff that's been coming out lately. Here's the thing, I don't think it's a critique of the projects themselves. I think there have been some really great projects coming out, whether they be movies and TV shows, over the last few weeks and even months. I think it's more a commentary or even like a side effect of the fact that lately, especially in 2022, we have just been bombarded constantly with new stuff, with new content from Hollywood, whether it be on streaming or even in theaters. Now that theaters are open again, we've just received so much from Hollywood, just throwing a bunch of stuff at us. And this may be a result of the pandemic, and may be a result of a lot of projects, you know, being delayed and all of a sudden they're coming out all at once. It may be a result of how competitive things are amongst the studios right now, and how, you know, streaming services are fighting for their lives, fighting for their lives for our attention, and we only have 24 hours a day, so like something has to give, right? But it may be a combination of both of these things, like who knows? It is a combination of multiple things, I would guess, but the result is still the same, and that is that we are constantly being bombarded with these projects, this content, hours upon hours of content that we can't possibly consume. You know, we can't possibly watch everything, one, and two, because it's a constant bombardment of this stuff, we can't possibly maintain the same level of excitement and the same level of engagement in all of this stuff, to the point where, you know, I used to be a completionist. I used to be someone who would stick a show out, even if it wasn't my favorite. I would be like, listen, I already started it and I have to finish this. Like, I have to complete this show, unless it was like the first episode where I was like, okay, I can drop this. But if I'm like 3 episodes in, I'm in it for the long haul, unfortunately. At least I was. But now I'm okay with just dropping the show. I'm okay with just dropping the show or the movie even, because there's just so much to watch, and it's literally like, thank you, next. Like, it's literally like, if you're not giving in the first few episodes or even in the first few minutes of an episode, then I'm gonna have to move on. Sorry, the Lincoln lawyer, like you're not doing what needs to be done. So I feel like I've become much more brutal with the way that I consume media, and I also feel like it's tougher to get me really, really excited about TV shows right now, and that's shocking, especially considering, you know, some of these shows that are coming out are part of major franchises that I love, like for instance the MCU and shows like She-Hulk, which we'll talk about in a second. But I find myself hard pressed to get really, really excited for She-Hulk. I'm into it and I'll definitely be checking it out on a weekly basis. That's not a show that I see myself dropping, but I think, if I'm being fully honest with myself, that if this series did not deliver in the first few episodes and it wasn't a part of the MCU, I would probably drop it. I would probably drop it, okay? And that's just because I've had to be really ruthless, because my time is valuable and there are a lot of fish in the sea. There are plenty of fish in the sea when it comes to the content that's available to us nowadays. Let's start off with She-Hulk herself. Yes, the series debuted last week on Thursday instead of Wednesday. I said in my Emmys reaction video, I believe it was, that Disney Plus was going to have to reevaluate its adoration of Wednesdays. It was gonna have to figure something out when it came to its Wednesdays release strategy, because there are more days in the week, okay, and they have a ton more content coming up, and I think the overlap with certain series, especially like Obi-Wan and Miss Marvel, was hurting the shows, especially in the case of Miss Marvel. So they really need to reevaluate their release strategy, and I'm glad to see that they took that to heart. They took my advice to heart. I'm sure someone at Disney was watching my video and were like, she's onto something. They took my advice to heart and they decided to release She-Hulk on Thursday instead. But anyhow, I really enjoyed the first episode of the show. I think Tatiana Maslany is definitely the star of the show. Like, she's definitely the highlight of the series. I really loved her interactions with Bruce. I feel like it was great to see this different dynamic in a relationship with their cousins, their family. They're not too close like brothers and sisters, but they still have that familial connection, and she still kind of mocks him, and they have that kind of sibling-esque banter. There was a moment where they had an argument though, whilst, you know, Bruce is trying to train her and he feels that she should remain in this like secluded island in Mexico where he can continue to train her into becoming a superhero after she becomes the She-Hulk, but she wants to return to her life as a lawyer. You know, she feels that, you know, while she completely agrees that she has something to offer to help people, the best way that she can do so is through practicing law and, you know, defending people in court. That's something that she has dedicated her life towards and has spent a ton of money and student debt towards, as she highlights herself. And I completely relate to that as a law graduate. Myself, that stung. So she feels that that's where she wants to help people, for, and I think that's really admirable, and I think it shows the character, you know, that she has as a person. But I do think that there were interesting points made on both sides, and that was also refreshing to see this kind of discussion of, you know, some people don't want to be the spandex superheroes. Some people want to do other things and have other vocations that they're interested in order to help others. That doesn't make them any less, you know, moral. It doesn't make them any less of a good person. But, you know, obviously in the lens of the MCU, we have seen these like heroes like Tony Stark and Steve Rogers and all of them be deified almost. Like they've become gods in the MCU because of their heroics. And so it was really interesting to see the perspective of someone who's not interested in joining that club, at least not right now. As I mentioned before, they have this kind of argument surrounding this where I feel like Jen was a little bit harsh. I did cringe a little bit where she kind of went for the throat against Bruce, where she was like, you're a loner, you're hiding from things, blah blah blah. Maybe it's the truth, but sis, like you don't have to be the one to say it. Like you don't have to be the one to say it, sis. Like you could have just, you know, smoothed out those edges that were a little bit rough. But yeah, that was the only moment where I was like, ooh. But otherwise, I really enjoyed their kind of sibling-esque, you know, cousins dynamic. I thought it was really refreshing for the franchise, and I think it was a great way to introduce the character into the MCU. It always helps to have help. It always helps to have a fan favorite kind of bring a new character along and introduce them to the fans, especially the mainstream fans who haven't read the comics. And I think Bruce Banner was obviously a great character to do so, just based off of the comics and their familial relationship, but also because we haven't seen Bruce, you know, really in a while. We've seen him pop up here and there for cameos and end credit sequences, but we were also curious to know what's going on with Bruce anyway, so the fact that he's featured in the first episode of this series was actually a really welcome surprise, at least if you didn't watch the trailers. Another big question mark that people had when it came to She-Hulk was the CGI. I remember when the first trailer came out and people were horrified at the CG for the series, and you know how this character was supposed to be, you know, depicted on the show. People were like, oh, it's looking bad, it's looking early 2000s, like what's going on? I have to say that having watched the actual episode, I do think that the CG is a little bit wobbly, but it's much improved. I don't know if they went back and improved the footage, or perhaps the trailer they had already mocked up didn't have the final version of the character. Who knows how these things get made? Either way, they did the work and really refined the CG overall, at least from what we could see in the first episode. But like I said, there were still moments where it was a little bit wobbly. I think she looked best when her hair was up. I think that the CG for the hair was particularly bad. I know that, you know, Pixar, for instance, and Disney Animation has really mastered hair and hair movement. It's actually very, very difficult. When you take into consideration the early examples from Pixar of, you know, 3D animation and how they used to do hair, like for example in Brave, where her whole personality is basically her hair. Her whole personality is her hair, okay? And so it's very noticeable when you see those old graphics versus the hair movement in Frozen, for instance. You know, those years of improvement really show. I think the fact that this character is like a live action character, she's not in an animated series, and perhaps of course because of the time and budget constraints of the show, I think it really limits what they can do when it comes to the animation of her hair. So it looks a little bit choppy, and it makes the character feel more like a video game character than a real live action person. Now, in terms of the structure of the episode overall, whilst I was a huge fan of Tatiana Maslany's portrayal of She-Hulk and Jen Walters, I will say that the episode wasn't the most kind of compelling or shocking or innovative in the way that it was structured, which was a little bit disappointing. I did also hear that apparently the show was reworked to hell. Apparently a lot of the first episode scenes were actually originally in the 8th episode. What? Like, what is actually going on over at Marvel? I may have to do a video about this. Guys, like, I don't know what's going on, but apparently like a lot of the scenes from episode 1 were originally in episode 8, so I think things have just been chopped up to pieces and just rearranged. I think it makes sense to have the origin story in episode 1, but I think the origin story itself was rushed and very poorly done. I don't know why Marvel has imposed this 30-minute limit on itself. It's clearly not enough time to tell a story properly, especially when you're introducing a brand new character who is beloved from the comics. Marvel, give the show a full 1 hour episode. Like, just do it. There aren't any well, actually there are going to be ads. There are going to be whatever, okay, but there aren't any ads at the moment. Like, why not just give the show a whole 1 hour debut at the very least, where we can really explore her origin story, where we can really explore this character as a lawyer and the work that she does and why she's so committed to, you know, retaining that that life that she built for herself. Like, all the arguments that she's making on the show are really valid, and all of the things that they want to explore are really interesting, but they don't have enough time to go into any depth. So right now it's just breadth and no depth, and that doesn't make it as compelling as it could be. Now, this is what I've been watching, so I can't go into as much detail as I want to, but let's just say that after the first episode, I have some concerns about the time, you know, the run time of each of these episodes, even though there are more episodes this time around. Thankfully, we've kind of started to drop the 6-episode mandates, okay? But I still have concerns over the runtime itself of each episode, and I have a little bit of concern over the story and especially the villains. We got the entry of Jamila Jamil at the end of the first episode. I thought she looked horrendous. I don't know if you saw my trailer reaction, but I actually gasped at the outfit that she was wearing when she burst into the court. I was like, what the hell is this? This is awful. So yeah, I didn't like the outfit that she was wearing. I wonder who her character is. I just hope that we get some really compelling villains in this series, because Marvel has really been struggling with the villains in phase 4. But yeah, that's a rundown of my thoughts of the first episode of She-Hulk. Like I said, we need to keep this going. We need to keep this nice and quick. We have plenty more projects to talk about, so let's move on to the next one. So the next one up we have is House of the Dragon. This is yet another show that has only released 1 episode at the time of filming, and I literally just finished watching that first episode. Guys, okay, let me explain. Let me try and articulate what's going on here. So, you know, one of the first videos that I did on this channel back in 2019. Oh, remember that time, 2019? Oh, crazy. Anyway, back in 2019, I did a video reviewing season 8 of Game of Thrones. I was so upset. I felt betrayed. I felt bamboozled. I felt like all of that, all of those feelings. You know what it was like watching season 8 of Game of Thrones. Please, you know. But all of that is to say that going into House of the Dragon, I honestly wasn't even sure if I was going to watch this show. I honestly wasn't sure. To me, like, House of the Dragon, my relationship with the Game of Thrones franchise, it's kind of akin to like a toxic relationship that I left in 2019. Like everything was fine for a few years, and then things just got worse and worse until the toxicity became too much and we had to break up. We had to break up in 2019. The relationship ended. And then now HBO and Game of Thrones is coming back and be like, baby, I can change. Like, just give me one more chance, I can change. And I'm like, no, I don't believe you. Like, it was such a shambles last time. I don't believe that you can change. I'm gonna need you to leave me alone. But then I keep watching the trailer and I'm like, oh, what if they can change? What if they can change? And so I decided to return. And I watched the first episode of House of the Dragon, and guys, it's good, isn't it? Like, it's it's actually good. Like, I don't know what to say. Remember how I said that a lot of these shows aren't getting me excited? They're not blowing my mind. I'm a little bit bored. Yeah, this show, it reminded me of why Game of Thrones was this phenomena that it actually was. Because they know how to make a good TV show, guys. They know how to make cinema. That's the thing about Game of Thrones. And I feel like there was a time, you know, it's still there. But there was a time when other, you know, studios and streaming platforms were trying to mimic this cinematic feeling. They were trying to escape the constraints of TV show filmmaking, and they decided to go down the more cinematic route. And I'm not saying that time is over. We'll talk about shows like Sandman later on. But I think that this first episode of House of the Dragon really reminded me how Game of Thrones really set the standard for that trend. It was a very expensive trend. And I think that's partially the reason why studios are kind of backing away from it now, because it is so expensive to make shows that are so cinematic. But I think that there is a lot of reward there as well. You know, the fact that Game of Thrones still holds that standard, and now it seems like its sibling, its spin-off, House of the Dragon, is maintaining that. And then also just the difference between shows like, you know, Loki versus Miss Marvel over in the Marvel camp. You know, like we can see the difference that it makes when you pump a budget into a show, when you make it cinematic, when you invest in a good theme song. Why don't shows have good theme songs? Loki's theme song is still on repeat on my Spotify playlist, okay? And when I heard the Game of Thrones theme song in House of the Dragon, not gonna lie, I almost shed a tear. Not gonna lie, I almost shed a tear. But yeah, it's worthwhile having a good theme song. All of these different aspects and elements are worthwhile in investing in order to make a show that really goes down in history as being incredible, so long as it doesn't suck in the final season. So long story endless, guys, I'm back. Like, I'm back together with Game of Thrones. Yeah, we've gotten back together. I'm gonna give them one more chance, okay? And listen, if the rest of these episodes aren't good, I might even drop the show. Like I said, I'm being ruthless like that these days, so I may even drop the show. But in the meantime, after seeing episode 1, I decided to give it another chance. I will say the one thing that is kind of playing against House of the Dragon is the fact that it is a prequel. Now, I've already talked about my thoughts on prequels in my review of Obi-Wan Kenobi, but essentially the problem with prequels is that it's really tough to garner that same level of tension and anticipation and curiosity in a prequel series or movie, because you already know what's gonna go down. Like, you already know what ultimately happens. Like, as great as Rosaria is, I think her name is Rosaria, as great as she seems to be so far, I know that she's not going to end up on the Iron Throne, because Cersei becomes the first queen on the Iron Throne, you know, like hundreds of years later in the main Game of Thrones series. So that's the difficulty when it comes to House of the Dragon, and like I said, all of these prequels. But whilst we may know the destination, we shall see if the journey itself is worth checking out. But I will say, after the first episode, I'm definitely intrigued. So next up, we're switching over to movies after talking about those 2 TV shows, and the first one up is one that I suspect a lot of you guys are very curious to hear my thoughts on, and that is Jordan Peele's Nope. I got to check out Nope finally last week, and I have to say, even though quite a few days have passed since I last saw it, I still have some questions. I still have thoughts that I need to kind of organize. But let's see if I can do a good job in organizing my thoughts in this video, in this very video as I sit here. But Jordan Peele has had a really great run so far, particularly with his first outing as a director with 2017's Get Out, which I think was one of the best films made in the last decade, easily. Like, it's not even a competition. It's not really a discussion. Like, Get Out was literally it. Like, it was everything and more, okay? And it of course brought us, you know, the breakout role that Daniel Kaluuya had, which led to him getting an Oscar down the line. So, like, we love to see it, okay? And I've always loved how Jordan Peele kind of centered these black characters in the horror genre, in the horror you know, movies and projects that he's associated with. It's definitely very refreshing, and it's something that we've seen sort of echoed elsewhere in Hollywood, like for instance with Nia DaCosta's Candyman, and of course one of my favorite shows that HBO has ever produced. We have Misha Green's Lovecraft Country from, I think it was 2020, I believe the show came out. So we have seen Jordan Peele start a little bit of a trend, a shy trend, a subtle trend, but a trend nonetheless, where we get to see these horror projects centering these black characters, and often wasn't exploring, you know, themes and social commentary that are relevant to these Black characters. And for that alone, I think Jordan Peele deserves our attention whenever he comes out with a new project. And so I was very much looking forward to Nope, which was his latest project, even though it did have a bit of a confusing release strategy. Like, it came out ages ago in the US and it only came out on the 12th of August in the UK. Like, how shambolic. How shambolic. Why were we punished? Like, there were no Olympics this time around. There was no World Cup. Like, why are we being punished like this? But we finally got a chance to see Jordan Peele's Nope in the UK. And if it sounds like I'm procrastinating, if it sounds like I'm putting off sharing my thoughts on this film because I'm kind of scared, that's because that is the case. But finally, I have to tell you guys what I think of this film, and I think it was good. I think listen. Was it as spectacular and mind-blowing and just like innovative and different like Get Out? No, I'm not saying that it could never happen. I want it to happen for him. I want there to be another breakthrough moment in his career where it's like, oh my God, he's done it again, you know? I'm really rooting for him on that front, but I just don't think that Nope was quite it. For me, you know, first of all, as someone who's a scaredy cat, hi, I'm Jean, okay? Many of you guys will know. Hi, I'm Jean and I'm a scaredy cat. And speaking of some of my very first videos on this channel, another early video that I posted was my review of Jordan Peele's Us, where I also informed you guys that I was a scaredy cat, and to this day sometimes I have the misfortune of thinking about Us and getting terrified, literally getting terrified. I have to say, in the case of Nope, like, it's not giving that level of horror, you know, like, we've really departed from the horror genre. It's not particularly terrifying. There are moments of suspense where you're like, oh, is something gonna happen? But the issue is that they kind of fall flat. And so, you know, considering the fact that I'm not the biggest horror fan, the fact that I'm saying this, you know, says a lot, you know, whereas there are people out there who love horror, who just really love that feeling that you get of terror when you're watching a horror movie. I don't know how they would have reacted to this movie, because it's really not giving that. But in the case of Jordan Peele, like, fine, if it's not giving classic horror screams, jump scares, there are a few jump scares in there which are really effective, but they're kind of just played off as something else, something not really relevant to the story. And, you know, whilst it's fun in the moment, I would say it's a little bit disappointing overall, especially when it comes to incorporating those horror aspects. It's like, oh, that wasn't really a part of the plot, it was just a jump scare, but it wasn't really relevant. Okay, but hopefully there'll be another thing. Oh, there isn't? Okay. Oh, there isn't anything as scary as that? Okay. There are some pretty striking scenes, some striking imagery, like the house that's covered in blood. That was pretty, you know, horrific. But it wasn't like terrifying, it wasn't scary, you know, which I'm okay with, by the way, because like I said, I'm a scaredy cat, but I can understand if you're disappointed, and considering it's supposed to be within the horror genre, it's something I kind of had to comment on. But speaking of commenting, like I said, Jordan Peele's known for his commentary in his movies, and here we have, I guess it's a commentary on, you know, Hollywood and basically doing anything for the shots. Like, is that what's going on here? You guys can let me know what you thought of Nope, of course, and, you know, what you kind of got out of it, the message that you got out of it. But for me, I interpreted the film as kind of being about these people who are willing to do whatever it takes just for that shot, you know, just like that TMZ journalist who was willing to give his life. He was literally dying, crawling on the floor, trying to get to his camera, the fool, trying to get to his camera, like, I need to take a picture of this, you know. I think it's supposed to be a commentary on the people who take selfies in dangerous places and unfortunately and tragically end up dying. You have these really well-respected filmmakers who treat people like crap, but as long as they get the perfect shot, right, as long as they are, you know, geniuses and experts in their craft, they deserve the respect, they deserve the reverence. Like, maybe that's what this film is trying to explore. And then of course you have the two siblings themselves, and portrayed by Daniel Kaluuya and Keke Palmer, my sis, and they also are doing whatever it takes to get the shot, which I found interesting. So it's like there was no real difference with the kind of villains, apart from the the monster, and the heroes of the story, because they all, at the end of the day, were trying to do whatever they could to take a picture of this flipping alien. Did I interpret this correctly? Like, I haven't had a chance to really sit down and really consider my thoughts, because on top of everything else that's going on, I'm still working. So yeah, but that's just what I've taken away from the film. There was a lot of interesting commentary. For instance, the first ever motion picture being, you know, this black man, this jockey on a horse, and how that tied into the is it Heyman's or Haywood's family history. I thought that was really clever. You know, the horse riding and taming animals, that was very much a theme in the film, and that also was relevant to the alien, and how Daniel Kaluuya figured out that you're not supposed to look at it in the eye. But was that hole his eye? I thought it was his, like, bum. Like, that's what, or his mouth. Like, what was that hole? I don't know. I don't know what that animal's eyes were. But yeah, like, he figured that out through his animal training kind of experience. So there was a lot of, like, layered commentary there that I got. But overall, I just didn't feel like it was as, like, life-changing and substantial and cohesive, really, as Jordan Peele's previous projects like Get Out and even Us, which I think was really underrated. I also like the inclusion of the video game store guy, who became way too invested in all of this. He became way too invested. Okay, the guy who looks dead ass the same as Dave Franco. He looks like an ethnic version of Dave Franco. Yeah, that guy, I think the actor did a great job, okay? And I think, like I said, he became way too invested in this nonsense. He should have ran far, far away, but apparently he was into conspiracy theories, so he couldn't resist. I will say though, Daniel Kaluuya is always a joy to watch on screen. The moments where he said the film's title, Nope, were really, really funny. They got laughs from everyone in the audience, so that was great. And Keke Palmer, I know that she was having a moment when this film was first released in the US, and rightfully so. I think she was also phenomenal. And I think another critique actually would be that we don't really get to find out a lot about these characters as individuals. You know, this is a film that very much takes place over the course of a few days, and the focus is on the alien in the sky, as it should be, as it should be. But they seem like such, you know, interesting and compelling characters, especially Keke Palmer, who's like always hustling, you know, always trying to promote her side business, or, you know, she says that the family business is her side business, but she obviously has dreams and aspirations, and I would have loved to see a bit more of that and explore a bit more of her character. That would be my critique, just because we got a little bit of a snapshot of these characters who are so well portrayed, that I would like to see more of them and explore more of them. Okay, so next movie up we have is Bullet Train. Now, this is a film that was much maligned by critics for some reason. You know, I remember going into the movie being like, I wonder how this is going to turn out, because critics really just did not like it. And honestly, this seems to be a common theme in 2022, where there have been quite a few action movies in particular that critics really just have not gelled with, and they've given them a really bad review. But on the flip side of things, audiences have been much more favorable towards them, and actually I tend to side with the audiences you know, in this trend, because I just feel like we know what action movies are. Like, we know like, we know that we're not going to get the most complex, deep, dramatic story. We know that we're not really going to get a ton of maybe character development and, you know, all of that stuff that you could expect in a drama. We're not necessarily going to get that in an action movie, but, you know, we still should be getting, you know, a good time. We should be getting some compelling action sequences, some really well choreographed action sequences like that. That's stuff that we should still expect. And when we get it, like, well, who's complaining? Like, I'm not complaining. I feel like this is just because of my thoughts on The Grey Man being so controversial, but like, I had a good time with The Grey Man. I had a good time with the 355 from earlier this year that really was just like butchered by reviewers. So I just don't understand this trend of like reviewers suddenly hating action films as if they haven't been this way for many, many years. You know what to expect, sure, but if it's done well, you know, if it's compelling, if the characters are cool and the action sequences are lit, then like, who's complaining? Like, what's the problem? I genuinely don't understand it. I don't hold it to the same regard as like a drama where I'm expecting certain things from that kind of film. I'm looking for something else when it comes to action movies, and if it delivers on the different criteria, then I'm happy. Then I'm a happy bunny. And I have to say, in this case, for the most part, Bullet Train absolutely delivered. So first of all, Bullet Train is directed by, I think, David Leitch, or was it Chad Stahelski? One of those, you know, John Wick guys. I think it's David Leitch. And I think the action sequences definitely benefit from that. David Leitch is, of course, from a stunt background, and he has his own like stuntman company where they create all of these films that have great, amazing stunts in them and really great hand-to-hand combat sequences, because they work with a lot of stuntmen and women. And so I do think that it was really sick seeing these action sequences play out in the train. Like I have always said, I'm a really big fan of hand-to-hand combat as opposed to like magical action sequences or like laser beams, which don't feel as real and hard-hitting for me. So this film definitely hit hard. This film definitely hit hard, super violent, super gruesome, but I was really invested, you know, pretty much from start to almost finish. My main issue when it came to Bullet Train was that by the third act, things became absurd and ridiculous. Like, it just became a messy CGI fest, and I wasn't really invested anymore in the action, you know, in the story, because it was just ridiculous. It was just overwhelmingly ridiculous. And even though I like the silly elements throughout the film earlier on, I just think they threw the silly. They just threw the silly at us by the end, and it kind of lost its more kind of edgy and effective touch, in my opinion. So that's why I would say the film kind of jumped off the wagon a little bit and went too far. But for the most part, for the first two acts, like, I was really in it. I really enjoyed Brad Pitt in this role as this lucky, unlucky assassin. You know, he is kind of over the assassin thing. He didn't even carry his gun with him into the bullet train. And he just, you know, kind of wants to turn a new leaf, but he can't because he's trapped in this life. So he's giving people this like random advice from, you know, quotes that he can barely remember. He's trying so hard to not be this person, but fate just forces him into the same old situations of his career. So yeah, he makes the most of it. He obviously shows why he's such an effective assassin, and I really enjoyed him, especially the interactions that he had with other characters, like Aaron Taylor-Johnson's character and Brian Tyree Henry's character in particular. And I will say, speaking of those two, they were fantastic. I think Aaron Taylor-Johnson actually died in this. Yeah, he did die in this. It's been a while since I've seen it, but if it wasn't for the fact that he died, I wouldn't mind a spin-off with just those two. The twins were sick. Like, I love the twins, honestly. And also, I must say, this is kind of like a PSA to Hollywood, and in particular to Sony. Don't think I didn't notice that you guys at Sony gave not only Aaron Taylor-Johnson, but Bad Bunny himself their own movies in the Sony Marvel universe, the Spider-Verse as it were, but you completely ignored Brian Tyree Henry, who absolutely deserved his own movie coming off of his performance in this film. What? I don't listen. I'm not gonna say what's going on here, but you're not gonna look me in the eye and tell me that Brian Tyree Henry delivered a bad performance in Bullet Train. You're not gonna do that. You're not gonna do that because it would be lies. It would literally be lies. Bad Bunny only really had like one scene, so like, I feel like that's suspicious as hell. Like, Brian Tyree Henry delivered an excellent performance. I really think he should have gotten something off of his role here in Bullet Train, and I think it's telling that he did not, whereas his co-stars did. Although I will say that as much as I loved him in the movie, I do think that his accent, his like Cockney British accent, was a little bit sus. Like, he tried, okay? There were times where it was really good, okay? But just, you know, to my Londoner ear, I was like, this isn't quite perfect, but everything else about his performance was really good. And another thing that I really loved about Bullet Train was the aesthetic. I appreciate a film that decides to have an aesthetic, you know what I mean? Like, I appreciate a film that goes there with the costuming, and the layout of the train as well was really creative. Like, you're stuck in this, you know, really confined environment. You have to make the most of it. Each carriage has to have its own personality, and I feel like they did that for the most part. And it just, you know, added to the interest. I really actually think that Bullet Train was a decent film, and I was shocked to see, you know, the negative reviews from critics. Like I said, guys, if you don't like action movies, maybe just don't review them, because it's ruining the fun for the rest of Okay, so the next project that I checked out over the last few weeks was Sandman. Now, Sandman is the latest adaptation of a Neil Gaiman kind of graphic novel book, I don't know, but this landed on Netflix, and was actually one of the most expensive series that Netflix, or actually Warner Brothers, has produced, because it's a Warner Brothers show. Why did it not drop on HBO? Actually, I guess we now know why it wasn't dropped on HBO Max, because it will cease to exist next year. Anyways, but Sandman is a very expensive show, which means the stakes are really high for it to be successful and for it to have a second season. In terms of my thoughts on Sandman, yeah, this is another project where like my thoughts are kind of all over the place. Here's the thing, I don't have the best track record with Neil Gaiman adaptations. I find that his worlds are a little bit too convoluted for me. There's just something about them where I'm not like engrossed. Like, there are elements that I really enjoy, but I don't like, I'm not like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen next, rocking back and forth. Do you know what I mean? Like, oh, I can't wait to see what the next episode holds. I'm like, okay, this is a fun time. Maybe I'll skip this part. I remember feeling this way about Good Omens, which overall I really, really enjoyed. I really liked Good Omens, don't get me wrong. I really, really enjoyed Good Omens, but it was mostly because of the two leads, not gonna lie. It was mostly because of Michael Sheen and David Tennant. They really sold the show, whereas they weren't in American Gods, and getting through that series for me was, whew, it was blood, sweat and tears. Okay, you know, speaking of not wanting to give up, unfortunately I did give up on that series even back then, because I couldn't go beyond season 2, I'm afraid. Sorry. That's just, and the concept was really good. Like, I really enjoyed it conceptually speaking, theoretically speaking. But in execution, it was dry, it was dull, it was convoluted. I just did not get invested in any of the characters. Like, I'm sorry. The second that main black man, you know, who's the lead in American Gods, started relaxing his hair, I was like, I'm done now. Yeah, me and Neil Gaiman don't always get along, and for the first few episodes of Sandman, I felt like I was getting a bit of deja vu. But I will say, by the time that I got to the, I think, 6th episode, I was really enjoying the series. I think it shouldn't have taken 6 episodes to get there, honestly, but that 6th episode, it's the 6th episode where you get introduced to Death, right? And you get introduced to his friend who lived in the medieval times, and then he became immortal because he was like, I'm not afraid of death. And then, you know, he finally meets up with the Sandman in the end. I think it's episode 6, but that episode is easily the best episode of the whole show, and I wish they had just focused on the magic that was going on in that episode, because everything else in comparison, especially in the earlier episodes of the show, was just so dull and paled in comparison. So yeah, I think by the time we got to episode 6, I was like, you know what, I'm invested, I'm in this, I really enjoy what's going on here. But I do think it also suffers from some of the same issues as previous Neil Gaiman adaptations, and I think namely the problem is having a bunch of characters that on paper seem really interesting, but in execution aren't really explored in any depth, and so it becomes very difficult to get invested in these characters. Like, I was so happy to see so many black women on this show. Welcome back, guys. I was so happy to see so many black women on this show, and I was like, oh yes sis, oh I'm so happy to see you. But like, we don't really learn a lot about them. We don't really look like, I know that the show is not about them, it's called The Sandman, so it's about the Sandman, right? But you know, I would have liked to see a little bit more about Morpheus's like assistant, who's the librarian, and I would have liked to learn a bit more about her story. We actually spend like a whole episode in the early parts of the season talking about this like demon slayer, or this exorcist woman who has a long lineage of exorcist women or whatever, but she kind of disappears, you know, after the first few episodes. It's like, why did we waste time on her when we could have explored more of Morpheus's assistant lady? So like, yeah, I think they should do a better job of exploring each of these characters, because whilst the lore is interesting in theory, I'm gonna tune in because I'm invested in the characters rather than because of my interest in the mythos, because I'm not really a fantasy girly anyway. I will say though, much like with Good Omens where the actors made the show, there were 4 standout actors that really kept me invested in the series. So first one, speaking of Morpheus's like assistant friend, her name is Lucienne. I just looked it up, and she is portrayed by Vivienne Akampong. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing her name, but I thought she was great as Lucienne. Really enjoyed her. I also really enjoyed my sis Kirby Howell-Baptiste as Death. Like I said, her introduction into the show was my favorite episode by far. And then we have my guy Boyd Holbrook as the Corinthian. He was stellar. He was definitely a standout. Absolutely. He was perfect, honest. I wish we'd gotten more of him. Why do they skimp out on Boyd Holbrook scenes? I don't know, but I wish we'd gotten more of the Corinthian. I wish we'd gotten more interactions between the Corinthian and Morpheus. Like, they obviously have a very contested relationship. Again, there were so many characters in the periphery that they became invested in for no reason, and they ended up not having enough significance on the show for it to matter. Like, for example, David Thewlis's character, the son of the blonde woman who stole Morpheus's instruments. Yeah, like, I didn't like his storyline. I didn't like his episode. The episode at the diner was really weird to me. I kind of skipped through it. So like, instead of all of those weird scenes, we could have gotten more of Boyd Holbrook as the Corinthian, which upsets me. But he was great. Like, he was absolutely phenomenal. And then of course you have the star of the show himself, who's portrayed by Tom Sturridge. First of all, his voice. What? Is that actually his voice is sick. His voice is so deep. Like, I was like, okay, like the voice is doing bits, like I must say. But vocal acting is being done here. Very good job, sir. He was moody, he was broody, he was giving Edward Cullen. Like, I enjoyed the character, honestly. And especially because with characters like that, when they crack the smallest of smiles, you're like, oh, that feels so earned. It means more because he doesn't smile, he's never happy. So when he did have those like quieter moments with Lucienne, I was like, oh, I want more of this budding friendship, please. And I was really happy to see him actually go through some like character growth. Like, he went through an arc where at first he was like a dictator, like he was the king of the dream world, and so he was very reluctant to kind of give up some of that power, even though Lucienne had been holding the fort down for the last 100 years while he was captured by a mere human. How embarrassing. But eventually he starts to learn to kind of give up some of that and listen to Lucienne, especially after she's proven herself for the last 100 years. So I appreciated that character arc, and I hope that we do get to see more of this series and explore the character's shift even further. Now, like I said, the show is very expensive. It does seem to have been popular, but not hugely popular, not like a breakout hit like Bridgerton or Squid Game. So we'll see if Netflix decides to renew the series, especially because it's made by Warner Brothers, who is on a mad one when it comes to chopping up budgets these days. So we'll see if we get a second season. But overall, I did enjoy the first season of Sandman, even if the first half or more than half was a little bit dry. And finally, we have the return of my girl Desi in Never Have I Ever. Yes, Netflix gave us Never Have I Ever season 3 whilst I was away. Can you imagine? I was so upset. This might be the one that I was most upset about, missing, because I've done my reviews for season 1 and 2, and like I said, I'm a completionist, so it's killing me that I wasn't able to do a season 3 review of the show. But I absolutely checked it out. And guys, like, I had a really fun time. I do enjoy this show, I must say. I really do enjoy Never Have I Ever. I think Mindy Kaling did a great job with this series. I love the exploration of Desi's family, the family dynamics there. I love how we actually see an evolution. Like, it's not one of those shows where they explore an issue with, for example, Desi and her relationship with her mother, and then just kind of try and you know, rehash that over and over again. Obviously, there's still going to be tension between the two, but I think after they've resolved things in seasons 1 and 2, in season 3, they're just allowed to be a really cool, you know, mother-daughter unit. And, you know, Desi's mother actually sticks up for her this season, you know, especially at the end there where her new bestie all of a sudden turns on her daughter. She's like, nah, I'm not having that. My daughter's been through a lot. Okay, she's really strong. And even though, of course, she makes mistakes, but like, you're not going to stand in my house and cuss out my daughter. That's not what's going to happen. Okay, sis, bye. But yeah, I love the fact that Desi's mum stuck up for her. It shows an evolution in the character and in her relationship with her daughter. That's faithful to what's happened in the previous seasons. So I really appreciate it. But then, of course, we have Desi herself and her relationships. That's kind of the crux of this series. That became quite painfully obvious in season 3, I must say. I don't know what's happened between season 2 and 3 for me as an audience member for the show, but it just became a little bit more grating to see how focused Desi was on her relationship this season. But still, that is the premise of Never Have I Ever, and here we get to explore her relationship with Paxton. Now, here's the thing. I don't remember what I said in my review of season 2 of Never Have I Ever. Did I say that I was for this relationship or against it? Either way, I've changed my mind. I just didn't feel like they had enough in common, and throughout season 3, I was just waiting for Davy to realize that her true endgame, her true perfect match would of course be Ben. So yeah, I'm team Ben. I can't remember if I was team Ben before. If I wasn't, please forgive me, I've changed my mind. But yes, overall, I did really enjoy the first season of Never Have I Ever. It's become a well-oiled machine at this point, so there weren't any huge surprises. I mean, Sis did get herself into yet another love triangle, this time around with another like Indian guy who, you know, things didn't really turn out great with him. Like I said, you know, his mom kind of turned against her. But it was great to see Davy explore what it's like to date an Indian boy, and we also got some commentary on the state of public schools in America versus the private schools, you know, the resources that was available to, you know, Davy's boyfriend's school versus what they had. Then, of course, we have the supporting cast with Davy's friends also having their own storylines and also exploring their own relationships. I would say that Davy's friends still struggle to kind of have a little bit of the spotlight on them. I don't think that characters have really evolved much in these last few seasons. I would definitely say that the romance-ish between Fabiola and Anissa was kind of pointless, and like, I don't know, I didn't love it. Like, it was just weird. I would have preferred if Fabiola had just, you know, tried to start a romance with someone else, you know, but in the case of Anissa and Fabiola, it just felt like these two young, attractive female characters were kind of smushed together and like, oh, make it work. Oh, it doesn't work? Okay, never mind. Like, that's basically what happened this season. In the case of Eleanor and Trent, I still, to this day, don't understand their relationship at all. Trent is annoying as hell. Trent is annoying. Like, there's cute annoying and then there's annoying, and Trent kind of falls under the latter category, I'm afraid, at least for me. I don't know what Eleanor sees in him, but sure, they're crazy for each other, I guess. And then, of course, you have Ben himself, who at the end of the series we see Davy hook up with. Like, finally, sis, not gonna lie, but like, where were you all this time? We knew that this was gonna happen anyways. But yeah, Ben is a gem. Like, he obviously was a terrible boyfriend. Terrible boyfriend. So condescending towards Anisha. Like, they definitely weren't a great match. But I do think that he and Davy are a better match. I do also very much enjoy the Ben episodes that are narrated by Andy Samberg. They're always expertly done. Overall, I think next season we're gonna get, you know, the substantial stuff, that we're going to get to the meat of the situation, which is the end game. Okay, the relationship between Davy and Ben. Let's see what they come up with for this season, and of course exploring Davy's senior year, and that also leads me to think that this might be the final season of the show, although I haven't seen anything about that. But it would make sense if they end on season 4, where she finally ends her tenure as a high school student. But that's it from me. Now that I told you guys what I have been been watching these past few weeks. It's time for you guys to let me know what your thoughts are on all of this good stuff down in the comments below. And of course, I would love to hear what you guys have been checking out as well. As always, please be sure to subscribe to my channel to catch you videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching and for your patience. Okay, I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.